Hi. Um, so I had so many ahas this week on our reading and on Dr. Paul's lecture that I really am only going to highlight some of my top thoughts here. So the first thing is that Dr. Paul says thinking does not take care of itself. And that was kind of, I think, a good wrap up of everything that we've been studying and learning so far about critical thinking. If you just, he used the description, some students would just prefer that, they open up the top of their heads and you pour in the information and they don't have to do anything. And so I kind of understand where his thinking was about thinking being hard, and a lot of people don't want to do it. They want the knowledge without doing the work. So I kind of understand his philosophy a little bit better in that regard. The second thing, he discussed how rhetoric and manipulation is not true communication, and he used Ronald Reagan as an example of how he's the great communicator when really as a leader, I think he probably communicated what people wanted to hear, maybe, or his followers wanted to hear, but he wasn't really imparting anything important. He was manipulating situations to his advantage, that type of thing, and so that was kind of an interesting, considering that he was talking about Reagan and what's going on with our leader today and the world in general. So interesting little aside that I thought was relevant. Next, he went over how as logic goes, that reason thinking should come before creative thinking. And to me, I had always thought, well, creative thinking is first, and then you kind of narrow it down into reasoning. But I can see where if you're at the very beginning stages of discovery on something where you have to make order of it before you can then expand on it. So I guess that kind of makes sense too, but I can also see it the other way. So, and next, I really appreciated his thoughts on writing, and it's kind of what we've already covered regarding, you need to have a problem, you have to discover the information surrounding that problem, both sides, draw a conclusion, even if it's no conclusion. And then I appreciated his thoughts to where you should probably take it one step further and think about the implications of what your conclusion is. And I think that's really important, especially if you're an influencer. I'm not particularly, I'm not a teacher, I'm a parent. I used to be an influencer, but at that point in my life where I'm a grandparent and, I don't have to discipline or influence any young minds anymore. So, but I mean, I do think it's still important that implications are considered when you're speaking or writing. So, and then in our reading, there was a few things, mainly where in chapter 4, I believe it was, where Dr. Paul discussed intellectual courage, and that made me think about, it really does take courage to see outside your own biases and your own what you've probably thought about and maybe firmly considered yourself in one camp your whole life or for a very long period of time, and then to go outside of that to really hear other people's points of view. And obviously in today's world that's not happening a lot. So I really look to I think people who, like, for instance, do documentaries inside hate groups or something of that nature where they, kind of go in and really document how these people think and why they think that, and what their backgrounds and their their stories are to how they reach those conclusions, you know, racism or whatever it may be. So anyway, that got me thinking about intellectual courage, and while it may not change your mind, I think it does take some courage to at least try and, you know, let those types of points of view kind of settle. Of course, I think it's more productive the other way, where, you know, a racist would have the intellectual courage to think again, you know, think to another's point of view in that regard, but that doesn't always happen. So, and then in some of our discussions this week, Dr. Cooper, you brought up integral theory, and so I have been doing a little bit of watching videos on Ken Wilber and some of his thoughts and the whole system that he outlines, and so it's been really interesting so far. And I think that's really, other than I, through some of the little rabbit holes I've gone down this week, I think I've really come up with a pretty strong direction I want to head in my thesis, and how I want to tie all my artifacts together. So that's good news. So anyway, thanks for listening.